Hey guys, Danny Johnson here, and today we're looking at the Starrett dial indicator. This one happens to be model 25-441J, the WCSC, and we're going to go ahead and set it up today and do a few tests with it just to show you how it works. Inside, I was very impressed to find this card that talks about Starrett and their reputation and their quality. And so the inspector has signed this card or printed his name on this card. But it just is a nice thing to see when you first open it up to tell you that they care about their product. Next, it tells us that it is pretty much set where 0 would be at 12 o'clock, but it's clocked over at 9 o'clock. So until you get from 9 o'clock to 0, that's just the preload that's set. So you can start measuring really anywhere on the dial. But it has the preload, so basically once it gets from 9 o'clock up to 12 o'clock, that's when it would be at 0. So we're going to go ahead and open this up. There's another cover inside here too, and we will be using the Noga stand, and I'll put links to both of these in the video description where you can purchase these on Amazon. The Noga stand was a little expensive, about $100, and so it's kind of hard to spend that on something when the indicator itself was about $200 as a more expensive one. But I did have to wedge it open slightly to slide this down in here. And as you can see on the back of the dial indicator, there's also a little area for you to put it through and hold it. And so they give you another plate on the back that you can remove on that too. And we went ahead and did that too to open it up just to show you what it looks like inside, because it is beautiful. So in order to replace this cover, we just took out these 4 screws. And once we removed this cover, you can see all the fine inner workings of this instrument. So we're going to go ahead and hit the plunger here, and you can see how it actuates here. So that was just a little look at the inside of what's happening. So here on the plunger, you'll notice this has about 1 inch of travel, so a little bit more than an inch actually, in order for it to go from that preload set at 9 o'clock up to the 12 o'clock position, and then it goes a little bit past that as well. So if we were to push this plunger, it will travel that full inch, and so you'll see how delicate it is, but with 1 inch of travel, it will go around 10 times. And then it'll come back, and as you saw, it went a little bit past the 12 o'clock position and then back to 0 here. So on the face of the gauge, we'll see the scale that this tool is measuring in. And so this is in inches, so 0.001 is what this is measuring in. So 0.1 would be a tenth of an inch, 0.01 would be a hundredth of an inch, and 0.001, as this one is set up, would be a thousandth of an inch. So every one of these marks counts as 1,000th of an inch, and so it goes around in this dial up to 100. So each mark is 1,000th of an inch, and that's also known as a graduation. Now, you'll notice on this one, it is in 10,000ths, so 0.0001 of an inch. So it's really important to pay attention to this when you're purchasing one, so you know that you're getting the one that you want to be measuring in. Now there's also a small hand that will count how many times we've gone around, and it goes in counterclockwise, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. And so that will keep track of every time we've counted 100 thousandths. So we're going to go ahead and run the plunger here to watch the gauge go around. And so what we're going to also do is turn this dial to put 0 right at the 12 o'clock position, because as they mentioned to us, it starts off at 9 o'clock position and has some preload. So once you get to 0, that's where you're intended to start measuring. Now you can start it 3 revolutions in and then start measuring. It really doesn't matter, and that's why you can adjust that. But as we go around, notice how we get to our first time around, and we're now pointing number 1 down on the small hand. Now we're pointing to 2. Okay, we're going around again, and 3, and so on and so forth. So this allows you to see and count and get a good accurate count of differences when you're measuring within an inch, because remember, the plunger is only moving a total of 1 inch. Okay, so as we keep coming around here, now we are at 700 thousandths, 800 thousandths, 900 thousandths, And you'll notice once we pass 10, it does allow us to slightly bury this needle. So there is some give room in each direction. So here we are, and we can go about this much further than it goes. And so when we release this, you'll see we'll come all the way back down, and it's going to end up right back at that 9 o'clock position on the gauge, which is where we started. Now, one of the other features it has as you clock this face is it does have this little set screw on the top right, and so with my right hand, as I tighten this down, we can lock it in right wherever you would want it to stay. And you'll notice that even just by moving that ring, you can be making adjustments to the size. So again, we're looking at 1 inch here, so imagine breaking that down into thousandths. And so that's how accurate this is, and those are very, very small measurements. Now we'll get into a few examples here of what we can use our indicator for. So we're going to look at this idler pulley, and it's something that should spin evenly and straight. And so what we've done is we've set this up, and again, setting it up is your accuracy. It has to be perfectly perpendicular to this. And you know, there's a lot of variables that will help your accuracy or throw off your accuracy. So that's something to keep in mind. So this is just for demonstration purposes. We're just kind of setting this up. But what you'll notice is we're already starting off with some preload on the dial here. You don't want to have it right at 0. So it's okay to start it off where it's already loaded up just a little bit. Okay, and then from there, we can adjust the gauge so that it's reading at 0. And so we'll go ahead and turn the dial here, and you'll notice even as I'm just turning the dial, it's affecting our measurement. Okay, but just for demonstration purpose, we're going to go ahead and set this at what we would say would be at 0. And now as we turn this wheel, we're going to see how much runout there is, or unevenness. And so as you're seeing, within 1/1000th of an inch, maybe 2, that's the measurement that we're getting on this. So this is how they also will check flywheels or other things that have to be balanced, or you'll get a vibration. It's not something you can look at and feel by hand for sure. As another example of runout, we're going to use this throwout bearing. And so think about this though. If this bearing isn't perfectly level, it's going to affect our measurement. And so setting it up is your accuracy. And so again, this is just kind of demonstrating the idea, but this was not set up perfectly straight and flat as you would need to do. But we're going to go ahead with some preload already on this, so it's already got the spring moved up just a bit as it's touching it, and we'll set this at 0. And now as we spin this, we're going to see if we get any measurement here, and sure enough, we're getting a few thousandths here. That's moving up and down. And again, that can just be because the bearing is set in this vise a little bit crooked, or maybe it just is an uneven surface. But anyway, this is just something that you can see as another check for checking the runout. We're also going to check the side of this throwout bearing because it does have a ridge that comes up, so you'd be able to see it on the dial. So again, we're putting some pressure on the tool first and getting it loaded up. And I put a little tape stripe here so we know where 1 full revolution is, and then I've set my gauge to be at 0 at this point. Okay, so notice as I'm turning this, we're getting our reading. We're up to 10 thousandths, 20 thousandths, and right when we're getting to 30 thousandths, right below that, it starts going backwards, goes back down, and now we have a negative number. But what we would do is take this total amount, and right now it's going to go back as it goes up over that ridge, and we get a full turn out of it, and then it starts to come back down. So anyway, this would be something that you could measure if you had to know that specification for whatever. What comes to mind is maybe like a camshaft lobe that's shaped that way, but that was just another example. But one of my favorite things to use this tool for would be for backlash, and we're going to set it up here, and then I'm going to show you a clip in a video where I did actually use it for installing gears. But backlash would be the forward and backward motion just like this, and when you're setting gears in the rear end of a car, which I did in the Mustang, the spec is very tight for that backlash, that movement back and forth. and so it's actually only 8 to 12 thousandths. And so this is what I'm trying to replicate here, is move it only 8 to 12 thousandths, and you can see how delicate that is. That's not something you can measure by hand, and that's important when you're setting the backlash on the gears for the car and some other things. So this tool is very important when you're needing an accurate measurement. And you want to have 8 to 12 thousandths movement. So right now we're all the way over, and as I push it back the other way, we're right about at the 8 thousandths mark. So I think that's pretty good, especially if it loosens up a little bit. You never know. We're looking like. Now, a very important thing as well is clutch engagement and a measurement for that. So basically we have a clutch fork here, and as you push in on the clutch pedal, it engages the clutch. And so the pedal travel is very important. You obviously don't want to have it travel too far and have the throwout bearing over collapse those diaphragm fingers, and you don't want it to have not enough and then be dragging and destroying the synchros. So it will vary depending on vehicle, but it's typical to have about 440 to 445 thousandths movement to engage the clutch. And so that would be 4.5 times around. And so as you can see on our counter, we would go in until we're about 4.5, and that's our travel of how much we would want to see. And if you have too much, you're overextending that clutch diaphragm fingers, and if you don't have enough, then you're not going to be able to shift either without damaging the transmission. So this is another useful way to get an idea and to take some measurements of how far your clutch travel is going to be. And you also have to keep in consideration how that translates from the bottom of the clutch fork compared to the top where the bearing's actually pushing on the diaphragm fingers. Now, as another example, maybe we're going to be measuring something that goes downward, and so instead of pushing up on our plunger, it's going to push down on it or release it. So basically, what you'll notice here is we need to set this up so that the plunger is deeper than what we're going to be depressing. So as an example, that plunger, we don't want it to come off of it when we push this down, so we're going to lift the plunger up and set it on the top of this. So what you'll notice is we'll now set this to 0, and as we push this down, we're actually going in reverse on the dial. And that's okay because we're measuring the total travel amount. So it really doesn't matter which direction the needle's going as long as we're seeing how far it moves. So on this one, you can see it moves a total of 250 thousandths, meaning 2 full revolutions around and a half revolution. So by counting it, we know that it moved a total of 250 thousandths, and that would be our total movement. Now in this case, it didn't return all the way to 0, and so that might tell you the spring, I mean, this is a cheap bottle that we're spraying on, not a mechanical part that's as accurate, that's going to always return back to where it was. But anyway, that's just how you can get an idea of how much something is moving, counting it what we would say backwards. Now I'll be replacing the input shaft on my transmission, and so it'll go from a 10 spline to a 26 spline as these alignment tools indicate. And so basically I'm going to check it for end play moving up and down, and the spec is to be 000 to 005 on thousandths. So 5 thousandths is the total movement that I'm going to want to see when I'm done with that. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please check the video description. I'll put links where you can pick these up on Amazon. Another few notes: if you see them with a yellow face, that's usually for millimeters, where this is measuring in inches. Also, if you try to change out the plunger length or something to get it to fit, then you also are messing with the accuracy. So there's a lot to know about these tools. Again, the Noga stand here was really nice. I like how the one dial here would make everything loose, or at the same time just tightening the one dial would get everything to firm back up with plenty of adjustability. So again, all I had to do is tighten this up here, and as you can see, each of these joints tightens up. So it's a little bit more money than the cheaper one that you can also find. But it just depends. If you want to get a good accurate measurement, that's where I decided I wanted to have a good stand for it just the same. And remember also, you're mounting sometimes to aluminum, so the magnet isn't going to work, and so you might have to mount a piece of metal to that aluminum And so sometimes setting it up is half the battle, and you are best off if you can set the stand to be on whatever you're measuring, like the gear set and everything like that, so you're not getting any differences in on mounting it to a table and then measuring something that's down floating on a vise or something like that. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Again, please remember as you're shopping for these to look for the unit of measure, the range that it's measuring in. If you're getting inches or millimeters, again, that yellow face would be millimeters. The white face ones are usually in inches. The counter, sometimes it counts to 10 as revolutions as it gets to the inch, and sometimes it does it in smaller increments there. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new, and if you want to see more videos that are like this, check the video description and stay tuned for more content. Thanks, guys.